away into each other's lives, and we could just fade away until we're all right.
GWD calling the shots once again. Yes, I am going to get a lot of hate for making a video about the Cincinnati Bengals making a Super Bowl run, but I'm going to do it anyway because I do this for the love of football. Now, football fans from across the world, the sport of football is very unpredictable. I know that there have been teams who have consistently been making the Super Bowl over the last couple of decades, but every now and then you get that one random team that makes the Super Bowl and no one saw it coming. A perfect example of this was the Carolina Panthers from 2014 to 2015. Now, for those who remember those two seasons, you notice that in 2014, the Carolina Panthers were 7-8-1. Even though they made the postseason that year, they had a losing record, and nobody expected them to make a Super Bowl within a year. So in 2015, they were 15-1. Nobody saw that coming. You know, they lost their big number one target and wide receiver in Kelvin Benjamin, and everybody thought Cam Newton was going to be overwhelmed. But he became the MVP. They were 15-1. Even though they lost the Super Bowl, they still made the Super Bowl. So I will not be surprised if a team like Cincinnati, makes a run. They have the athletes to do it, but can Zach Taylor put them all in position to win? But first, let's talk about why Cincinnati has been so stagnant in the Marvin Lewis era. The Buffalo Bills had a chance to sign head coach Marvin Lewis, but they wanted to sign Greg Williams instead. Then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a chance to sign Marvin Lewis, but after firing Tony Dungy, they did not want to take a chance in hiring back-to-back defensive-minded coaches. So the Cincinnati Bengals took a chance and they hired Marvin Lewis. And prior to hiring Marvin Lewis, the Bengals had not had a winning season or made the postseason since 1990. So when Marvin Lewis became the head coach for the Bengals, he turned some things around, and he had a few accolades like 4 AFC North titles, 7 playoff appearances, 5 straight playoff appearances from 2011 to 2015, which is a team record, and he has the most wins by a Bengals head coach. But the thing that stained Marvin Lewis's career was the fact that he could not obtain a postseason win, and he was 8-31 in primetime games. And a lot of us football fans wondered why Marvin Lewis was a head coach for so long, despite his playoff woes. So the first reason Marvin Lewis stayed at Cincinnati for so long is because he had earned the trust of Bengals owner Mike Brown. And he did this by bringing a level of professionalism and structure to the team. Now, an example of this is that former wideout for the Bengals, TJ Houshmandzadeh, stated that before Marvin Lewis became the head coach in Cincy, the team did not provide any players with water or Gatorade. So the players actually had to use the fountains or hope that the cafeteria was open. Then TJ went on to say that the team provided the players with used jock straps. Yes, used jock straps. How cheap of Mike Brown. So TJ used his money and provided all the players with new jock straps because his rookie contract had quite a bit of money. Then he said during home games, players were encouraged to stay home instead of a team hotel. Mike Brown is going to make sure he saves that money. So all of this changed when Marvin Lewis became the head coach there. And Mike Brown gave Marvin Lewis a respectable amount of power because he respected the fact that Marvin Lewis was changing the culture in Cincinnati after they had been stagnant for so long. You know, guys, the word nepotism and business should not go together in the same sentence. You know, football is nothing but a big algorithm. You know, you can be successful based on the smallest of momentum, and then you can be the worst or the laughingstock of the league just because you made one bad play. You see, Marvin Lewis, I know he turned a lot of things around in Cincinnati, but he made a lot of mistakes, and Mike Brown should have fired him in the year of 2015 when they almost beat the Steelers. But Marvin Lewis could not control his players, and the Bengals ended up losing that game. In my personal opinion, this was Marvin Lewis's most important game, because when you look at the 2015 Bengals, they started off 8-0. That was a very good season for them. You know, Hugh Jackson and Andy Dalton was a great marriage, and basically Andy Dalton was playing his best football. And you basically beat the Steelers with a backup quarterback. And had the Bengals won this game, they would have had a lot of momentum heading into the divisional round, and Andy Dalton would have been healthy, and you guys could have been battling it out for the championship game. You know, there are some coaches that are good at setting a foundation, and Marvin Lewis was good at that. But then there are other coaches that are good at finishing the job, something that Marvin Lewis was not good at. You should have fired Marvin Lewis after the 2015 season and hired a coach like Anthony Lynn or Doug Marrone that were coaching candidates in 2016. So the Bengals should have hired a coach to finish what Marvin Lewis had started. An example of this is, I know this is basketball, but this is a good example. We all remember when Mark Jackson was the head coach for the Golden State Warriors. He took the Warriors to back-to-back playoff appearances. But to the Warriors front office, that just was not enough, because the Warriors knew they had a lot of young talent. So they fired Mark Jackson and they hired Steve Kerr. And basically the rest is history. Ever since Steve Kerr became the head coach for the Warriors, they've been in a championship every year. And that's because the Warriors front office, they saw an opportunity and they took advantage of it. So in Cincinnati's case, 2015 was their opportunity, because the following year, 2016, in my opinion, the best coaching candidates were Anthony Lynn and Doug Marrone, because they both have had recent playoff success in the recent years. So, you know, the NFL is a business and it's a machine. It's about now and tomorrow, not yesterday. And if you did not want to fire Marvin Lewis, you could have just hired an assistant head coach. Hey, if the Bengals want to make the Super Bowl, they have to be consistent and clutch. Yes, I know that is a formula for a lot of teams, but let's look at how the Cincinnati Bengals records looked like under Marvin Lewis as their head coach. Roll it. When they were so close to becoming great, then they'll take a step back. This has to change with Zach Taylor as their head coach. They need to finish games, and they need to finish the season. Hey, I believe in you, Zach. You know, I know you got a lot on your plate, but I still believe in you. So the Bengals front office still have faith in Andy Dalton. And I believe that a lot of Bengals fans should have faith in Andy Dalton too, because Andy Dalton has done a lot for that franchise. He has had more winning seasons than losing seasons. But when it comes to the sport of football, the marriage between player and coach is very important, despite what people think. So the marriage between Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton was just average. Marvin Lewis did not bring the most out of Andy Dalton, in my opinion. But I believe Zach Taylor can bring the most out of Andy Dalton. And if Zach Taylor can do that, then I see Andy being at Cincinnati for 2 to 3 more years. But if Andy Dalton performs poorly, then I see the Bengals making a push for a quarterback like Justin Herbert out of Oregon, or Tua Tagovailoa out of Alabama. Or if Ryan Finley impresses us in the preseason, then maybe he can be Andy Dalton's successor. So what Zach Taylor has to do is he has to analyze the Bengals roster, and he has to take advantage of the athletes he's got. And if Cincinnati can stay healthy as a team, they have the athletes to compete with anybody in the NFL. And they're a little similar to Kansas City when it comes to athletes. I know Mahomes is more talented as a quarterback, but Andy Dalton's a good West Coast quarterback. And when Andy Dalton is good, he's very good. Tyler Eifert If he can stay healthy, he's a good vertical threat. If AJ Green can stay healthy, he's a good possession wide receiver. When you look at how fast John Ross is, John Ross can be similar to Tyreek Hill if Zach Taylor can develop him properly and be creative with John Ross. Joe Mixon is solid, and Giovanni Bernard is good in the passing game. And the Bengals drafted 2 more running backs, in which I'll talk about later in the video. So they have 4 pretty good running backs on their roster. So with that being said, Cincinnati has to stay healthy, and they have to take advantage of their athletes. You know, I made this channel to show people that football is a process and it's more detail oriented than what the media shows you. So, you know, you got some people say that, oh, the Bengals offseason was the worst, it was the lamest, and then you get some articles stating that the Bengals did not do anything this offseason. What a lot of people fail to realize is sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years to build the team you want. It does not always happen in one season. For some teams it does, but for others, not so much. Jonah Williams out of Alabama was a very solid pick because, in my opinion, he was the best lineman in the draft, and Bengals need help within an offensive line. So I think they're ranked 22nd in protecting the quarterback, I believe. So picking Jonah Williams was a very good pick, and hopefully, you know, he can be their generational lineman for years to come. And he seems very consistent. He has a high motor, and this guy loves football, and he's ready to tear some heads off. Sample out of Washington. A lot of people did not like this pick, but I like this pick because I like utility guys. You see, fans like highlight players. I like guys that can do a lot. Drew Sample is a very balanced tight end. Mike Potts, Bengals scouting director, said that we have yet seen the best of Drew Sample because he said he's more balanced than what he appears. You know, a lot of people see him as a blocking tight end, but he said he's more athletic and he can be good in the passing game. So for the second straight year, the Bengals have drafted an Ohio State lineman, but this time he is named after the legendary Michael Jordan. So Michael Jordan stands at 6'7", 312 pounds, and he seems like a very solid player. The Bengals can develop him to a solid player, and he was the first Ohio State player in 23 years to start as a true freshman. So in the 6th round, the Bengals have had some fun at the running back position. They drafted Travion Williams from Texas A&M. Travion Williams broke the single season record for most all-purpose yards in Texas A&M history, so I believe he'll be a very solid player for Cincinnati. The other running back that they drafted is Ronnie Anderson. Rodney Anderson injured his neck in 2016, but came back in 2017 and amassed for 1,100 rushing yards. So what a comeback. Now Cincinnati has 4 solid running backs coming into the season. Now, if Travion Williams and Ronnie Anderson can prove themselves in the preseason, then I do not think Giovanni Bernard will stay there. They may trade him to a different team and use Mixon, Anderson, and Williams as their primary young running backs. Hey, when your car gets wrecked, you need car insurance. So Ryan Finley, I believe they drafted him for insurance. Now, if Ryan Finley can prove himself as a good backup in the preseason, then maybe he might be the future of Cincinnati. But if he doesn't, you know, I think they drafted him as insurance. Now this guy, his body structure reminds me of Jared Goff. So if the Bengals and Zach Taylor can develop this guy, Ryan Finley, then maybe Zach Taylor has his own version of Jared Goff. The Bengals' 32nd ranked defense was the worst in team history, and their weakest point was their linebacking core. So the Bengals drafted Jermaine Pratt out of NC State. Now in his senior year, he had 104 tackles with 6 sacks. So this is a good way to start for the Bengals. So now let's go back into the 4th round, and Bengals have drafted defensive tackle Renell Wren out of Arizona State. Now, in his final 3 games at Arizona State, he had 18 total tackles. This guy stands 6'5", 315 pounds, and hopefully him and Geno Atkins can be a 1-2 punch within that interior line. Then, in the 6th round, the Bengals have drafted another linebacker named Deshaun Davis out of Auburn. He made 116 tackles in his senior season and was Auburn's starting linebacker for 3 years straight. Now, he's not a tall linebacker. He stands at 5'11", 233 pounds, but he has a high football IQ and he's a sure tackler. So in the last round, the Bengals have drafted cornerback Jordan Brown to help out the defense in the secondary, and hopefully he can earn a roster spot within that defense and be a good solid third corner, maybe somebody similar to Walter Thurman III. In his last 2 seasons at South Dakota State, he recorded 6 interceptions. Just because he's drafted in the 7th round does not mean he should be forgotten about. I mean, we've all seen guys like Josh Norman work their way to the top, so hopefully this kid can do the same. The Super Bowl may look far to Cincy fans, but the Bengals are not tanking this season. In the NFL, you are only playing for one thing, and that's the Lombardi Trophy.
I said I got this, none of this radio pop shit. I dropped this, turning back the clock to rock shit. I cop it, said knock knock, I'm on this. I'm hot bitch, like a hot bitch, the top
I lock in, I got this, radio drop this. Hot shit, just watch this, I fucking promise. Too lit, do not miss your chance to cop this. Will you capture it, or just let it slip? Or say I wanna be him, cause my rap is tight. No really, they just give a fuck that I ain't black and white. I'm not anyone else, man, I'm one of a kind. So sit back, relax, and listen one more time. I said I got this, none of this radio pop shit. I dropped this, turning back the clock to rock shit. I cop it, said knock knock, I'm on this. I'm hot bitch, like a hot bitch, the top lit. I said I got this, none of this radio pop shit. I dropped this, turning back the clock to rock shit. I cop it, said knock knock, I'm on this. I'm hot bitch, like a hot bitch, the top lit. I love the girls that fuck with my music, getting referrals from the girls, love to booze it, party and lose it. That's the life I'm choosing, not losing. That's my 2 cents, so use it. You know I'm back, as a matter of fact. I'm better than ever, never been better. I know that I wrote that. Sipping on some coke and no jack, could stare and bitch and take a pic. Kodak, I threaten the game, cause money and fame, they don't affect my brain. It's fucking all the same.